Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel at War update. And as we're set to deliberate the latest developments here in Israel, with chief focus, of course, on the Gaza Strip, Lebanon, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and broader topics as well, it's always important to remember how this war began. 368 days ago, on October 7th of last year, the Islamist Hamas and its terror affiliates in the Gaza Strip have launched an onslaught on southern Israel, declaring war by perpetrating a massacre, murdering some 1,200 mostly civilians, wounding over 4,800 others, and kidnapping approximately 250 people, including elderly, men, women, infants, and children. 101 of them remain in Hamas captivity to date. The subsequent day, on October 8th, Iran essentially joined the war by greenlighting its proxy Hezbollah to launch cross-border attacks against Israel. Since then, this Iranian proxy Hezbollah has launched a staggering 12,000 projectiles toward Israeli territory, and not Hezbollah alone. Additional Iranian proxies from Syria, from Yemen, from Iraq, as well as Iran proper, have launched direct attacks against Israel. Let's now turn to our TV7 editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren. Amir, for today, I'd like to focus, since there's not enough focus on this topic, 101 hostages, including an infant, including a toddler, including women, men, elderly, are still in Hamas captivity in the Gaza Strip. What is going on with that?
So 36 of these 101 are officially pronounced dead. Their bodies held by Hamas. There are probably more hostages who have been either murdered immediately on October the 7th, but their death has not been officially pronounced, or killed in captivity. So the informed guess is that about half of the 101, approximately 50, hopefully more, are still alive. Now, we are 4 weeks away from the US elections, so there are efforts by the outgoing administration of Joe Biden and the president himself, Vice President Harris, the White House spokesperson, Secretary of State Blinken. They all speak about their hectic efforts to get a deal. They don't say before the elections, but soon. Whether there is any hope to do that separately from the diplomatic activity which has to do with a ceasefire in Lebanon or not remains to be seen. In Lebanon...
Before you move to Lebanon, if I may, Mr. Oren,
Sure.
Because we are hearing after weeks where the leader of Hamas in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, was unreachable for multiple reasons. There are now reports that he has conveyed messages to his counterparts in Qatar, and this report has also been confirmed by an Israeli official. What can you tell us about that? Is this really a restart yet again to vigorous negotiations?
So there was a report a couple of weeks ago that Sinwar may be dead already, but this was a minority view in Israeli military intelligence. The majority view there, as well as in Shabak, the Internal Security Agency, and Israel's Southern Command, was that he is alive and in due course is going to give some sort of response to the various mediators.
The majority assessment.
This was the majority assessment, and it has proven right. And we don't know the content of the messages, and perhaps he has some estimate of what is best for him now that Nasrallah and the other Hezbollah leaders have been eliminated, whether it is his turn to close the deal or not, whether it's good for him to wait for an Israeli action against Iran for the elections. We don't know how his rationale is working in this regard.
Indeed. Well, of course, Division 162 is still heavily active in the Gaza Strip.
There are two divisions in Gaza, 162 and 252. The first one is a regular army division, the second one mostly reserves, as against 4 divisions in Lebanon. So this ratio shows you that the center of gravity has shifted north.
Indeed. And for the Northern Front, I'd like to turn to Colonel in Reserve Miri Eisen, a senior fellow at the Institute for Counterterrorism at Reichman University, formerly a senior officer at the IDF Intelligence Directorate, and an advisor at the Prime Minister's Office. It's good to see you, Miri. I'd like to ask you if you'd like to comment first and foremost on the Gaza Strip, but immediately after that, an additional division has entered into Lebanon. As Mr. Oren just mentioned, 4 divisions, a significant force to establish a limited incursion into Lebanon as it was predefined, in collaboration, of course, with the Americans on this matter. How is the process currently ongoing, since there's little to no information coming out beyond what the IDF spokesperson's unit provides?
Well, that's because Hezbollah doesn't want to provide any correct information. I first would like for a moment to talk a bit about the hostages. And for a moment, I want to remind everybody that on the other side of the equation, both what Amir was talking about before, what you, Jonathan, were talking about, is not just Yahya Sinwar. It's those people who are close to him. These are the extreme extremists who do not view these Israelis that they've taken as human beings. They view them as bargaining chips. And those bargaining chips are bargaining chips, I hate to say this, but I want to be clear, both alive and dead, meaning you can arrive at an agreement, and we all want those who are alive to get back. But I want to remind us all as Israelis what having Israeli soldiers held by Hamas from 2014 as dead soldiers has done to us as society, meaning it isn't just about getting back the live, it's also about getting back the dead. This is about Israeli society, who we are, and for Hamas, that is their strength, that is their bargaining chip, because they don't view them as human. And I just want to put that out because I'm not a happily ever after person when it comes to the issue of the hostages. There are no easy ways. There's no going in, finding them, coming out. And we need to be both resilient and with a heart. And I say that because we need to be resilient when it comes to what Hezbollah has on the other side of the border. Because Israel has done over the last 3 weeks, and I'm going to say even the word amazing, but it is taking capabilities that have always existed in a very focused way to attack directly Hezbollah's capabilities. And we all know of what's been happening, if it's in Beirut, if it's at the targeting, what the alleged Israeli attack with the pagers, all of the different targeting from Hassan Nasrallah and down. What's less understood is what Israel, the Israeli ground forces, are doing in Lebanon. And I am going to quote the IDF spokesperson, but I'm going to put it in my terms. What Israel is doing, the Israeli forces are clearing out the Hezbollah preparations to do on October 7th. And I want to be very clear, on October 7th, to come in overland, underground, from the air, from the sea, to come into the dozens of communities on the Israeli side. So I'm saying that's the plan. We all saw what happened on October 7th, 2023, a year ago. But what Hezbollah had was 10 times more in the strength, in the weapons, in both the Jeeps and the motorcycles, the pickup trucks and the paragliders. And the Israeli troops have been going in literally a kilometer and exposing underground subterranean capabilities. Go look at the pictures. They've been exposing the cache of weapons, the weaponry itself, both inside the tunnels, attack tunnels towards Israel, but especially the harsh part is the enormous amount of weapons found inside people's homes. Jonathan, you and I would not allow a cruise missile to be in our living room. Amir, you and I would not allow an anti-tank or RPGs to be underneath our child's bed. And this is what the IDF is exposing in the close arena right next to Israel. It's both a topographically challenging arena. It's very hilly, vastly different from the Gaza Strip. But what Hezbollah has there is very similar to what Hamas did. The underground and the above ground, meaning inside the civilian communities, in the houses, under the mosque, in the bottom of the school, and of course next to the hospital.
Indeed. A couple of points just for the sake of our viewers. There were 4 hostages since 2014 in the Gaza Strip, including 2 IDF soldiers that were kidnapped, killed and kidnapped, already dead, in a Gaza tunnel by the Islamist Hamas, and another 2, including 1 Bedouin boy and 1 Ethiopian descent Israeli, who were also taken hostage in Gaza after crossing into the Gaza Strip. Both are classified as mentally ill, and therefore they acted upon that, but nonetheless Hamas held them. And of course, the Bedouin boy, a Muslim, not Jewish, not Christian, a Muslim who was taken captive because the tribe he's affiliated to is affiliated to Israel. And therefore, this is not necessarily a Muslim-Jewish war. This is a lot more than that. There's a lot of evil going on here. But with regard to the high intensity in Lebanon, we're talking about a significant amount. If in 34 days in 2006, Israel launched roughly 200 precision strikes on various Hezbollah targets in Lebanon, today we're talking about the first 48 to 60 hours, just in that period time span, targeting the amount of targets that were launched during the entire 34 days of war in 2006. Mr. Owen.
Well, there have been 3 major UN Security Council resolutions over the last 46 years regarding the north of Israel and the south of Lebanon. The first one, 425 of 1978, after the so-called Litani operation, created UNIFIL. The first I in UNIFIL is interim. 46 years of interim. It's really permanent. The second I is in Lebanon. And Israel withdrew from the southern part of Israel, but created a sort of cordon sanitaire, a security belt, which was manned by friendly local troops, most of them Christians, even though the population there is mostly Shiite. Then, if we fast forward to 2005, after the Rafik Hariri murder, there was Security Council Resolution 1559 calling on all militias, all armed organizations to disarm. Hezbollah, of course, didn't want to do it. It had the so-called Taif agreement from 1989, which allowed it to do it. And then came Resolution 1701 after the summer of 2006, the Israeli campaign which you alluded to. Now, what is happening now is that Israel is enforcing 1701 by going in, by pushing the Radwan forces, the attack force which Miri talked about, of Hezbollah, back, mostly north, sometimes west, of the Israeli communities, but also going into the villages, which Israel hardly did 18 years ago, because now, because of the arms, you know, just to portray it, Hezbollah came to the Shiite villagers, who were sympathizers anyway, and told them, listen, you can get money if you take a boarder, a tenant. But the tenant is not going to be a person, it is going to be a projectile. So if you have such a tenant, you are a lieutenant. You are no longer a civilian. You are an officer in the Hezbollah force. You are a combatant. And you expose yourself, your home, your family to battle. And this is what is done. The Israeli forces are methodically going from one village, one town to another, taking apart all of these hideouts with the weapons and pushing away the Hezbollah force. Because there are still talks, at least, not negotiations, but there are talks about a ceasefire. This ceasefire will be effective only after Hezbollah, not before, after Hezbollah has been pushed across the Litani River.
Indeed, and the Litani River is, of course, not a straight line, excuse me, on the southern part of Lebanon, but rather it's like an upside down L, if I may call it that way, which makes it, of course, a lot more complicated with the Bekaa and the northern parts of Lebanon, or north east of Lebanon, and therefore you really need to understand the various complexities there, Colonel Eisen. When we look at this complexity, how can we maneuver in such a way that, on the one hand, many of those Shiite villages are indeed affiliated with Hezbollah and have been actively participating in storing munitions for this terrorist organization, but there are also clans among Christians, among the Druze, among the Sunni Muslims that have affiliated themselves with Hezbollah for the sheer reason, as Mr. Olin mentioned, Lebanon is broke. They need to get money from somewhere, and if this is easy money to be able to provide for their families, desperate people call for desperate measures at times.
One of the biggest challenges for me when I talk about Lebanon, and this is very different from the Gaza Strip, is that it is a sovereign failed country, meaning it has a government, but the government doesn't function. Let's talk what that means, government not functioning. It doesn't supply you with an electricity grid that you can use. It doesn't have a functioning taking out garbage collection in the country. It doesn't have any of the capacities that we so take for granted that that's what a sovereign country does, where it kind of takes taxes and gives back to the country. And what's filled in that void in this failed state, Lebanon, has been, and here I'm going to say, the Shiites. It's both Hezbollah and Amal for the Shiites, and every one of the other subgroups, the denominations. It's a very interesting structure there. They each have their own. It's all totally separate. So to your question, Jonathan, it's like, at the end of the day, what do people want? And I still say that, and I emphasize it. I would not rent out my living room for a cruise missile. This does have to do with ideology. And Israel has been very clear. We're telling people, you're uninvolved, leave, go save your lives. Don't allow these terror entities not only to take away your place and your home, but also your life. And it's not an easy situation, but we're not targeting the civilians. We're targeting these cache of weapons, these Radwan fighters who both live in these villages, but also underground. And I'll just give from an example of Beirut that everybody's looking at right now. And that southern neighborhood, which was, as everybody says, a Hezbollah stronghold. And when I watch the Israeli attacks against the different Hezbollah targets, look at the view, not because it's pretty, it's horrific. But in military eyes, what you see are what we call secondary explosions. What does that mean? It means that we attacked a place and our explosive went off. And because our explosive went off, it makes all of the weapons that are there, those arsenals that are there, explode. And oh my God, what is being held underneath these civilian communities at the heart of Beirut by Hezbollah? And I wouldn't want to live that with underneath me. And I don't want the Lebanese to live with that underneath them. And I want to hope that what we're doing in southern Lebanon, that Amir described so well, in that systematic clearing out, that at the next stage, the country called Lebanon, because there is a country, it's different from the Gaza Strip under Hamas, that the country called Lebanon, with the help of the world in a different way, may decide to do for themselves a different future. Having said that, let's remind everybody, Hezbollah, the direct line to the Islamic regime of Iran. And I want to see that we're taking care of that supply line, of that ideology, and of what the Islamic regime of Iran is doing directly against Israel.
We all remember, really, my heart goes out to the Lebanese people. They're good people there. What you're seeing in Europe, what you're seeing in the United States, in Australia, people marching down Canberra and Sydney with hundreds of flags of Hezbollah and Hamas and all those terror organizations. These are not the Lebanese people. These are not the majority of the Palestinian people, for that matter, who want peace. And this is something that I think people don't realize. They're not all evil. There are terror organizations that are heavily embedded, that are supported by state actors, including the Islamic Republic of Iran in particular, that is using cynical, really in a very sinister way, the various populations of depleted states infested with corruption in order to push forward their narratives. And we just saw the Iranian Foreign Minister, Mr. Oren Abbas Araghchi, deliver a speech to supporters of the Ayatollah regime in Tehran, during the course of which he boasted that that Iran is the #1 supporter of the axis of resistance, as he calls it, of course.
But you also saw how many of the Hezbollah operatives wounded by the pager explosions went to Iran, to the Imam Ali grave and mosque, and the vision of so many people who were maimed or blinded by the Israeli, probably not officially, action showed how much Hezbollah has been decimated by these actions. For the last month, it has been so degraded. Defense Minister Gallant said today that it is weaker than Hamas after
I believe
a year.
that.
Now, the Lebanese constitution calls for a single-term presidency of 6 years for a Christian, mostly a Maronite. And every 6 years or so, there is a crisis in Lebanon, which eventually leads to military action. It was in 1958 when Camille Chamoun was the president. The Americans landed, so the army commander Fouad Shihab was elected. Then let's skip 1976 with Frangieh and others. 1982. Elias Sarkis, the former governor of the Bank of Lebanon, was about to finish his term. So there was jockeying. And Bashir Jumayel, the leader of the Lebanese forces of the Phalange, had Israeli help. Now there is no president, but probably out of this chaos, the Israeli actions against Hezbollah will let the politicians finally choose a president, whoever it is, so that the country can start refunctioning.
Well, the candidate who was backed by Hezbollah and is part of a clan of a Christian Maronite group that supports Hezbollah and Syrian President Bashar al-Assad against other Christian clans and villages and towns, actually withdrew his candidacy. So
he was the son-in-law of the former president.
No, it's somebody else.
Somebody, not Gibran Bassel.
No, Gibran Bassel, it's somebody else. But nonetheless, we're talking here about a very complex scenario. Let's focus, because we have roughly 3 minutes and 40 seconds. Colonel Eisen, I'm going back once again. The Iranian foreign minister comes out and declares that on the one hand, they are very proud of their support for continued resistance against Israel. Then he conflicts himself immediately thereafter by saying, we don't seek war. And then he conflicts himself again by saying that if Israel retaliates for the already 2 attacks that Iran launched against Israel, there will be an even more vigorous response. What are we to take from this whole mumbo-jumbo this diplomat supposedly was uttering earlier last night?
First of all, the Iranian foreign minister, the last one who was killed together with the president in the helicopter crash in May, can have a lot of impact, meaning it's a figure that people listen to just like around the world. And when he makes statements like that and he contradicts himself, he says, it's all about bluster, but we don't want war, but we will defend ourselves. What I'm saying is something which is destabilizing the Islamic regime's, the Islamic Republic regime's words. And that, to me, Jonathan, is a good thing. I do not want the Islamic regime, the Islamic Republic of Iran, to be the one defining the agenda. I think that they should feel that they are being hunted and haunted, that they should feel under attack, that they should feel that they are not the ones who can supply weapons and instability and their horrific ideology, and that's the way it all goes. And in that sense, listening to him, I heard one thing. Khamenei, who likes to tweet, and he tweets also X in Hebrew, will continue to say that Israel is not going to last. And I have news for Khamenei. Us Jews, we've been around for a while, and Israel is here to stay. I don't want a war. Having said that, I don't want the Islamic regime of Iran to define anything, not in the Middle East and not around the world.
And just for the sake of those who think it's only about Jews in Israel, it's about Druze, it's about Christians, it's about all Israelis who proudly carry this passport and say that they're not willing to waver in the face of adversity, and particularly not the Islamic regime in Iran or any of its proxies in the region, and will fight vigorously against them. With that said, last sentence, Mr. Owen, from you.
Well, people should not really expect regime change in Tehran anytime soon.
Why not? Let's hope for it.
Well, hope, yes. Expect, no. There is a slight difference. But the son of the late Shah has already announced that he is ready to resume the throne of the Pahlavi. Now, of course, he doesn't necessarily have a lot of support back home, but it does indicate that the opposition is getting some encouragement for what has happened to Hezbollah, the main proxy of the regime, and that perhaps we will hear some underground rumbles.
I suspect he has more support than the current Ayatollah regime in Tehran. But with this, we have run out of time. So I'd like to thank immediately Colonel Eisen and Mr. Oren for all of your insights. I'd like to thank all of you at home as well, and to highlight TV7 Israel is a donation-based nonprofit, and therefore, if you're blessed by our productions, would like to help support our programs, please do so by prescribing a donation. You can go and do so via our website at www.tv7israelnews.com. From here in Jerusalem, have a good day.
My name is Doron Gavish, and my background, 30 years of serving in the Israeli Air Force. My last job, I was the commander of the Israeli Air and Missile Defense during the introduction of the Iron Dome to the defense of Israel. All of this allows me really to be part of the team here in TV7. It is super important to have such a platform. We talk about the global situation, we talk about Israel, and those different angles which are relevant to the discussion.
For more of TV7's productions and editorials, we invite you to visit our website at www.tv7israelnews.com.